The Paid to Play Podcast. Sim Lauren, miniatures painter and consignment knitter. Whether by PC, pod or pad, you are listening to Paid to Play. I'm Rob Farker, your host for this exploration of the dangerous idea that bringing your whole self, especially the bits of you that you worry make you seem silly, geeky or odd, into your income-generating life is one of the best things you can do. It mightn't be easy, but it is easier than we think and even fear. And with the help of my guest for this episode, I'd very much like to show you how. Now, it's an especial pleasure when you get to record an episode of something like this with an old friend. Sim Lauren has been a mate of mine since the mid-90s in Sydney. I was really happy that she and my wife Vicky got along so well, and she's one of the people whom I regret leaving behind when Vicky and I moved up to Cairns. Thankfully, though, it was probably a good thing as we discovered sort of a mental illness, if you will, because for some odd reason, though, Vicky and I had both left England and said good riddance to the country, Sim went over to the UK on holiday, took one look at the place and said, I love it, and later on moved out. Look, I can't speak for her overall mental condition. She's still there, so I'm assuming that she's not sought help. But it does seem as though, in balance, it was definitely a sound decision because Sim has certainly flourished in the UK. I am happy to have her on the show for two aspects of her life. Sim does have a day job, of course, but she does supplement her income in two ways. A couple of episodes ago, I interviewed a lady by the name of Terry Litorco, who is a hardcore tabletop gaming fan with a specific focus on miniatures wargaming, a hobby where you actually collect, assemble and paint scale, although not necessarily completely to scale, miniature figures of warriors, whether they be fantasy, contemporary, historical or science fiction, or even some odd melding of a couple of those categories, like, for example, the heavy hitter in the miniatures wargame industry, Warhammer 40,000, which takes a gothic fantasy setting and transplants it into the far future, with Eldar, who are space elves, orcs, who are space soccer hooligans, Gretchen, who are space goblins, and space marines, who are space marines. Anyway, but as I mentioned, not only is Lauren into this hobby, she also gets paid by other people to put together and paint miniatures to a quality standard for them. Now, the fun bit is she also has another line of income, which is consignment knitting, which you would perhaps think would be a rather odd meld for someone who is into tabletop miniatures. But really, this is one of the things that I want to get to with this podcast, that it is about bringing your whole self into your income-generating life, and that means your income-generating life does not have to be about one thing, as much as the world might tell you it has to be. So it is an especial pleasure to have me old mate Sim Lauren on this show. Lauren, thank you very much for your time and thank you for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me on. I must admit, I spent much of the last couple of weeks with massive imposter syndrome. And it's been quite interesting going through some of the things that I might want to say and realizing, well, just because I have a day job doesn't necessarily discount the experience and the thoughts and useful information I might have about making my hobbies pay. You said I've been doing this for about 10 years now. I've been a contractor as my day job in IT and various other industries for even longer than that. I think my first full-time proper job was in 2001. So I found between contracts, going and earning income from my hobbies was a very quick way to generate income, although it didn't start off like that. My original goals with this was to have my hobby be a zero-sum pursuit so that it wasn't costing me anything while I wasn't getting an income.
I absolutely. I think a lot of people, perhaps when they do hear about the concept of this show, sometimes will think about their current situation and go and try and discount themselves as potential guests, when really it's the people like you who are in that sort of either perhaps juggling things while maybe on their way to dropping the day job and trying to make their side thing full-time, or even just, as you say, trying to make their hobby a zero-cost thing, make what they're going to be doing regardless anyway, pay some of the bills and maybe even get a little bit of extra. And, there is, of course, a lot of value in that. So look, imagine for a second that at the end of this chat, I give you a magic ticket. That magic ticket is good for doing one thing that you are either keen to try out or get back into, and a magical rearrangement of your schedule to give you the necessary time to do that thing. What would be on your short list, Sim?
I've got it down to 2 or 3 things, and it really depends on the magic ticket. Do I get a ticket back? Because I don't want to end up... So the thing that first come into my mind is, at the moment, this weekend that we're recording, is a big convention on in Melbourne, Australia, called Conquest. Down in Melbourne, at a different venue this year. I'm not sure which one, but I've been coming across I'm on Twitter, and a lot of people are having a lot of fun down there without me. And this hurts every year. These conventions that I would go to, Phenomenon in Canberra and Conquest in Melbourne particularly. And it's just one of the things I do regret living over here without teleportation technology is that I can't just nip back for the weekend to go and catch up with everything. Because for me, very heavily entwined in this is my community. It's the people that make this worth doing, definitely 100%. And that role-playing and miniatures wargaming convention down in Melbourne would have been my number one. But, as I said, do I get the ticket back again? Because that's a very expensive and lengthy flight home if I end up stranded in Melbourne on Monday afternoon.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So, what else, if you had the opportunity, would you use that magic ticket on?
Oh, the second thing on my list is actually from my wargaming interests, and that is... I also need to clarify, would my magic ticket come with a funds coverage clause as well? Because I was quite happy last year. I finished painting, as a commission for a friend of mine, a Chaos Reaver Titan.
Wow.
Which was at the time the biggest model produced by the British company Games Workshop. And it stands at 16 inches high. And I saw a tweet, I can't remember who it was, come through my feed a couple of days ago, from a Titan builder about their Titan, which was, it is like building a small child. Which sounds like it's a bit flippant, but really, it really was. It was bringing something alive, and she developed a personality on me, and I had to turn her around to face the wall at night because she was staring at me as I walked past, and I got really unnecessarily and quite unbelievably attached to this. It's not a small robot, and it has arms and legs and a face and a personality, and I'm sort of ringing up my friend who owned her, saying I need to name her soon because she's going to name herself. She was a she, which I just knew, and it got a bit weird. And he was like, "Okay, we'll indulge the crazy painter." And we came up with a name, And then when the time was sort of come to let her go, I took her back to his place and set her up. And 2 days later, he emailed me and went, "Oh my goodness, she is a she." She looks at me. I'm like, yeah, no. It was bringing something alive. It was quite a brilliant experience, and I was so proud when I was done it. And then 2 months later, they brought out an even bigger one.
Oh God. I mean,
which is the Warlord Titan.
Oh, bloody heck. I mean, I know, of course, I'm sort of roughly up on my Warhammer 40,000 lore, and, you know, you mention a 16-inch tall Titan, and the first thought that goes through my mind is, knowing that your average miniature in that scale, and we're talking 40k scale, aren't we? Yeah.
40k, so it's 28 millimeter heroic scale.
Yeah. So
it's the size of the pilot. There are four of those pilots in the
head of the Titan.
In the actual head of the Titan.
Yeah.
You can paint the inside as well. It's an unbelievably amazing, fun, time-consuming, horrible thing to do. But I'm going. The thing is, I reckon my second one. The second one's going to be a lot easier now I've done one. My husband's not so happy to hear that, but we're both at a place where we realise that a Titan is going to happen in our future, and we've agreed not to be too mad when it arrives. But I'm just having a bit of a break from it. It was well and truly beyond my skills of the time. I definitely bit off more than I can chew. I blew up. I killed 2 Dremels. Before I went out, Aldi Dremels, really cheap ones, before I went out and actually bought a Dremel proper. And it's great. The thing is, that commission allowed me to spend money on upgrading all my tools. I upgraded my airbrush. I upgraded my Dremel. I got a lot of a different set of tools because it's a different scale. So all of my tiny little picks and files and stuff were not going to work. So even though it didn't make me a lot of money, it did end me up in a better position where I'm able to take on bigger jobs now than I had when I started. But yeah, so the Warlord Titan is an absolute monster. How
big is it? Because, I mean, as I was about to say, to my mind, a 16-inch Titan is small, because Titans were... I remember seeing the old epic scale kind of thing, and Titans were meant to be pretty freaking huge.
The Warlord one in Epic? Yeah. There was the Reaver, and then there was the big square Warlord one. No. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. It is half as big again.
Bloody heck. So that must be, 24 inches? That's 2 feet. That,
easily. And then you've got the guns on top. Yeah. It's the size of a small child. It is ridiculous. And I want it. I want it so much. I want one so much.
So we're not talking commission.
But it also costs more than a reasonably priced second-hand car.
And we're not talking commission here. We're talking you wanting one.
I want one. Yeah. I didn't want a Reaver. I wanted to paint one, so I did an incredibly good deal because I wanted to paint one for a while. I did it did not cover my time. It just covered my tools and materials, the cost of that. But I've always wanted to paint one, and now I've seen the big one. There's no way I would commit to painting that for someone else, having been through the Titan drama. It took me 2.5 years to do it. I reckon it'd take me 3 months at the time.
Yeah.
And it took me 2.5 years to get it back to its owner. So, lessons learned. But that's killed my queue. So my queue at the moment, I'm not taking any more commissions till I clear it out because I'm 2.5 years into something that, it was a problem. And
thanks to this one frickin' Titan,
Big Titan, and that's a good lesson to learn. Learn to say no. So you're like, got a Titan on your desk, don't pick up more commissions. Don't just, and that's a problem I have is saying no. Yeah. No to people.
I know what you mean. I'm working on that myself. Okay. Well, I guess that's pretty much covered your options for there. So, we talked a little bit before the show, especially on how you sort of picked up, well, not how you picked up, but how knitting came to be a part of your life. I think as we've kind of opened on miniatures, especially with the talk about the Titan, we'll go there first. So when did, the miniature wargaming hobby become part of your life? When did you first encounter it and know it was for you?
Oh, it's always been, I'm just trying to think, back in high school, I was quite late to the nerd scene. It was sort of when I was 16, 17, discovered Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing was a thing. But it wasn't really until I went off to uni that I discovered wargaming as a hobby. Before that, my family, we've always painted model kits, Airfix and Revel and stuff like that. But it wasn't really something I was into. I was more into the electronics hobby aspect and helping them wire up lights and solder through connections and make little flicker circuits and things like that, but not the actual painting side of it. Mostly because the enamel paints give me a massive headache.
Yeah.
I don't get on with them at all whatsoever. And that's what my family were using was the old, Humbrol enamel paints. But since going to uni, I joined the wargaming club because they needed numbers. It seemed interesting. And then I moved to Canberra and discovered the Canberra Gaming Society and got into it a lot sort of more through them. Was asked to help out a couple of people there on projects that they had going, and just really haven't looked back. Discovered I liked the painting more than the playing, definitely. And just started, and that was basically it. I would, the first couple of times it was working for pizza money, and then they'd split sort of profits with me or things like that, and then people would sort of ask me, oh, you're free, I need this painted for a tournament, can you do it? So it was always people approaching me and me going, yeah, I've got time, go ahead. And quite informal, and it sort of stayed like that for a little while until I moved to the UK. And again, I was not able to work here for 6 months because of my visa. So I was really, really bored very quickly, but we didn't have a lot of money to spend on hobbies and stuff. So I was painting stuff for people for free because of that. And eventually it sort of, as I was looking for work when I was able to start charging money, I then had a 6-month gap in my employment history and no references in Britain.
Yeah.
All my references, 11 hours behind or ahead.
Yeah.
In Australia, so it was really difficult. That first job took me quite a while to grab, but in the meantime I was plugging away at the consignment knitting as well. I jumped onto some forums, particularly Ravelry machine knitting forum, and picked up some work through that. Was just making garment blanks and material panels with my knitting machine. And for long I realised it wasn't really gas money. I just wanted to pay the gas over winter, basically, because it's expensive here. And I sort of realised a couple months in it wasn't really beer money or gas money anymore. It was kind of getting towards being taxable income. So I then had to sort of think, well, how does tax work in the UK? Because I know how to declare that all in Australia. My sister's a bookkeeper. I just go, oi, sister, help me out. And we trade. I do data entry for her bookkeeping, and she sorts my tax out and makes it all go away and just goes, send a check this much to this and put this on it and fill out this form, and it works out. And so that was probably the hardest struggle coming to Britain, is working out how their GST, which is called VAT, value-added tax over here, works, how that's collected, how the tax office works completely differently. I'm still not entirely sure how it works. I now employ people to sort my tax out because the tax office here are frightening and I don't want to be deported. No,
certainly not.
So, and that's sort of where that's at.
Well, okay, so let's wind it back a bit, especially as knitting is now back part of the conversation. When did that come into your life?
Knitting's been my whole life. I cannot remember a time when I did not know how to knit or crochet. I've been at it since I was a kid. My grandma looked after me quite a lot. And I'm ADHD. What do you do with an ADHD 4-year-old? You teach him how to knit, give him a crochet hook, and you give him a ball of yarn, you give him a pile of tea towels, and you go crochet decorative borders around that for charity. One thing people don't understand about ADHD is it's not always just scattered thoughts, but the hyper focus as well. So one of the problems I have at work is that I will hyper focus on the task to the absolute exclusion of everything else. And while if that task is something important, that's not a problem. But if that task is something that really doesn't matter, it does cause problems. So I, as a 4 to 11-year-old, was spending a lot of times at my grandma's just clocking out one after the other, the same. Grandma would tell me a pattern, show me a pattern. I would reproduce it as a decorative border on a flannel while we watched her soaps of an afternoon. Most school holidays and whenever my sister was sick and my mum had to go to hospital with her, it was a normal thing for me to be told what to do, shown what to do exactly, and have to reproduce it several times. And then as I grew up, it became obvious that I was going to be extremely tall for a woman. My mum made sure that I knew the skills that I needed to do to modify patterns to suit my size and shape. Because I'd have to make my own clothes, because it was inconceivable to her that the entire generation coming up after me would end up being my height. But I remember going to the shops with my mum. We were heads and shoulders above everybody else. I'm 6'1", my mum's 5'11". And when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, that was frighteningly tall. Whereas now, it's not so bad. You can walk into a shop and get a size of 10 shoe almost everywhere, whereas when I was a teenager, that was unheard of. Shoes went up to 9.
Yeah.
Clothing was not long. But the 90s really, really did change, that end of 90s and beginning of the 2000s. But, I still had the skills, but that also meant that I could go mill diving. So go around to all the little wool mills, buy their mill ends, which is when they make a massive batch of yarn. They wind them onto big cones to sell off to clothing manufacturers, and anything that's left over that doesn't quite get onto like a 10-kilo yarn cone will get sold off in their little mill shop. Now, I only need a kilo to make a jumper. That kilo of yarn, if I walk into a boutique, it'd be costing me $100 to $200, whereas from a mill shop, it's $30, $40.
Yeah.
So I can make, and then that's all it is my time. I can make some really beautiful clothes for not a lot of dollars. But then the inverse of that, so running my knitting sort of side of my business, like my consignment, running like my commission painting wouldn't work. Commission painting, I have someone come to me and say, I need you to paint me this, like this, for this thing, by this thing, for this much money. Running it any other way, and people say, why don't you just buy a whole lot of stuff, paint it up and put it on eBay? It's such a customizable, personal thing. Everybody's army has a certain look. It needs to have things match in with that look. Unless you can paint high studio quality or put so many hours into it that it becomes like a competition piece as somebody's like a central character, it's not worth putting on eBay unless you've had someone come to you. But at that time, you've put so many hours into it, it becomes inefficient cost-wise.
Yeah.
I like charging myself £5 an hour, which is $7 or $8 an hour. Just because it seems to be, it seems to be a good amount that'll still get me enough business. Yeah. I pay people though £10 an hour, unless I'm teaching them, if that makes sense. So I'll do sort of apprenticeships. If people want to start up their new business, I'm quite happy to outsource some of my lower end stuff. I pay them £5 an hour and I charge 10 and I keep half because I'll go through and detail it and clean it up, and they're my customers. And I like kind of doing that, very similar to how I sort of started out, where people were going, I've got too much work on, can you quickly flock these bases for me. Yeah, okay.
Cool.
And they're using my equipment, and I supply them everything they need. So when I charge myself £10 an hour, that will also include all the paint and glue and a percentage towards wear and tear on my tools and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but that's kind of difficult to do because you're like, well, how much is 10 hours work? And what I've worked out just with experience is it works out to be about recommended retail price for tabletop quality. So there are different standards of painting. This is getting really complicated, mate. I'm sorry. I'll try and keep it as general as possible. But it comes back to asking people what they want and how much they want to pay for that. And that's probably my biggest bit of advice for anyone starting out in this is if you're doing commission work, get all your details knocked out up front. How much is this going to cost you? How much do I expect you to be depositing me? Am I expecting you to provide me the models? Am I buying them myself? Am I expecting you to provide those models in a case that they're going to be returned back to you in, or are you going to give them to me in boxes on sprue? Am I going to have to assemble them? Am I going to have to base them? All of this is extra time and effort and materials on my part, but also what happens when you can't pay me? And that is a horrible thing to sort of talk about. And that's basically when I say to people, you know, what's going on? I have your models and you pay me half up front. And if you can't pay me, I put your models on eBay. And that's how I recoup my money. And that's the thing, because people get into bad situations or they disappear off the face of the planet, but it's something you need to talk about and work out before it ever happens. Depending, in Britain, that's a big thing. Talking about money over here is a bit of a cultural taboo. They don't like it. And some people say, oh, you're jinxing it, saying, oh, it's the worst that's going to happen. But I think you need to be very upfront. And also, what happens if I'm late or something happens?
Yeah.
What happens if I fail on my part of the deal? What happens when you fail on your part of this deal? And get that out of the way up front so they know what to expect, right? If you send me an email and you don't hear an answer back from me, you know, these are the avenues you have to pursue it. This is my registered trading company for my company, and this is this and this is that. Sometimes I do drop off the face of the planet. We have a disaster at work. I'm trapped on a plane. I'm in Texas for 2 weeks. It happens. I don't turn my phone on. That's expensive.
Yeah.
So it does happen. Most people I talk to, I haven't had any new people I paint for a little while. They kind of understand that, and that's okay. But the other thing that you need to sort out, actually, no, I've lost my train of thought. You're going to edit this out. Hang on.
Like I said, editing is a bit of a pain in the bum, so the least I can do, the better. But yeah, I can take chunks out. That's no problem. Well, look.
Yeah, no, I got it. Okay, right. So I'm going to pause for a bit so you have some clear. The other thing that is very important to do when you're doing any kind of commission work is have an email address you can email them photos of, or always paint them up or make them or create them a prototype first that they can sign off on in writing back from an email address. So they know exactly what they're expecting and they're not disappointed after you've put 600 hours into a project when they're like, but I wanted them green. And you're like, oh, I thought you said yellow. Whoops. So always paint up lots of pictures, always. And even if you're doing a massive chunk of work that's batch painting and you haven't talked to them from a couple of days, just put one of their models in a funny place and do a, what is it called? Flat George, Flat Henry, Flat Stanley. You know the movie Amelie with the funny gnome?
I have not actually. I know of Amelie, and I know roughly what it's about, but I've never actually seen it, I'm afraid.
Okay. Take a photo of their model doing something funny and send it to them so they know that you are still thinking of what they're doing. It's not professional, but they're not freaking out that you haven't talked to them in 2 weeks and you've still got all their stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So you have them sitting there, you know, all of the models on your desk going, yeah, I still got all your things. And that constant communication. There's no such thing as over-communication, ever. And that is really, really, really important because they are emotionally attached to what you're doing for them.
Yeah.
And and for you it might be a job or another batch, but for them it's their hobby as well. And that's super important. Now, conversely, the consignment work is literally I get sent a bunch of materials, I get set a pattern, and I get told what colours to make, what garments and what shapes and what sizes, and then I send them back. There is no creativity on my part. There's no really accountability. I get my instructions, I make what I make, and I send it back. It's on consignment, and it's the same garment or panel over and over and over and over and over again, and I get paid per piece.
Right.
And that's definitely the most lucrative of my two income streams. And that is something that always surprises my model painting community, is that I earn more money from my knitting than I do my model painting. But it's just sitting down. I don't have to do any legwork on trying to find people, don't have to do any research. There's no assembly required. I just get my knitting machine out. I tend to watch YouTube episodicals. So I love me my tabletop for this. A bunch of people talking in the background. I don't really have to pay a lot of attention to it. I like that. X-Files are brilliant for it. Actually, Buffy. Anything that's really talky, not very visual. Up I go, put that on in the background and just plug through it. So, probably the same for my painting as well.
But
I watch a lot of that.
From the sounds of it, with the commission work, the consignment work, you're basically being paid to be an organic machine. There's not little. It's the repetitive skill, rather than, as you've mentioned, there's no creativity in it. It's very specific.
That's right. I mean, told exactly what to do. But the same thing, if I was doing consignment painting, so if I was painting for a studio. It would be very similar. They're like, here's 15 Space Marines, paint them like this for this customer, and you've got 3 days to do it, go.
Right.
So I can see that in that industry, it would be a very similar experience to that. I don't want to run a studio like that. It's killed, and that's actually the other thing, is once your hobby becomes your business, it does kill your drive for it to be a fun thing for you to do as a hobby. Definitely, 100%. And I see it a lot of the times, really, really prolific modelers and painters get a job for a big studio and then they just drop off the face of the earth. And half of it is NDC. They're not allowed to show me what they're painting at work.
Yeah.
And half of it is they're just not finding fun. After you've gone to work and spent 8 hours painting Space Marines, you don't want to come home and see another Space Marine as long as you can live.
No.
And I can really understand that at all. I've got my pile of stuff piling up. Actually, it's so bad it reached the ceiling, and I've had to start my pile again.
Oh boy!
Yeah, it was interesting. Yesterday I spent. People follow my husband on Twitter. He has been heckling me all day because I was sort of opening up boxes and going, "Oh yes, I own another Titan." Whoops. But I only had 3. He thought I had 5. I have only had, 4. 4 technically.
Right.
These are little Titans.
Uh-huh.
These are little Titans.
So only 1 foot tall as opposed to 16 inches or something like that. Or small.
Well, 1 foot tall is still only 12 inches. No. They're little. They're like 8. Okay. I've got one. Okay, one's a customer. One's a client. So one doesn't even belong to me, and that's a normal plastic one. And then I've got a Phantom, which is, that is a 12-inch one. And then I've got 3 30K. That's a newish game that I have a Titan problem. We've both acknowledged that I have a Titan problem, and we know that one day we're going to go to Warhammer World and we're going to come home with a Warlord Titan. That day is not today.
So, from the sounds of it, there would... one of the thoughts that went through my mind is I can imagine people asking, given that consignment knitting work is more lucrative than miniatures painting, why not, drop one in favour of putting the time into the other? And from the sounds of it, it sounds like it's for kind of that reason that you did mention, especially with regards to the day job, and we were sort of talking about it a little earlier on, of keeping your portfolio diverse from a personal perspective as well as an income survival perspective, if you know what I mean.
Actually, no. It's the community.
Mm.
So since moving to the UK, there are a lot of machine knitters in the UK, but there are not a lot of machine knitters in London. They're all further north, up where all of the old milling industry is. All the wool and cotton mills are all up in the Midlands, up in Scotland. So there's not a lot of machine knitting culture down here. There's a brilliant shop called Metropolitan up in Cheshire. That has workshops and week-long conventions and runs classes, but that's quite a number of hours away on a train from here. Not a lot of people my age knit. Certainly not a lot of people my age machine knit. And they're not all on Twitter every day posting up pretty pictures of what they've knitted yesterday. The reason I love the wargaming painting so much, and actually why I've gone... It's not. I'm talking a lot about Games Workshop, and at the moment I kind of fell into that since moving here. It's what my husband's into massively. It's what a lot of people we know are into. Yeah. But I will and do and have painted from other things. There's a little miniatures company called Anvil Industries, quite a short distance away from us here. They have a game called Afterlife, which I'm quite heavily. Not heavily, a big fan of that. They've got a massive diorama display game board, 3D, beautiful display board. It won best game board at Salute last year, which is Salute is a massive wargaming expo and sort of sales convention. They've got some demo games as well, but it's mostly all these tiny little miniature wargaming companies from all over Europe, and not so tiny as well, come in to show off what they've done and what they've got. It's enormous. It's absolutely huge. There is no equivalent in Australia of this. And that's in a couple of weeks, 16th of April, that'll be on in London. And so you get a lot of these companies coming in through there, and you can find beautiful games that are just starting out. People kickstart sort of interest for their Kickstarters there as well. And that's beautiful. And you've got all these people come together at one place. Oh, sorry, I've got something in my eye. And just the excitement over that. But the online community, particularly on Twitter, I mention Twitter a lot. That's where I hang out. And on forums and around the place is absolutely huge. You can always walk into a local friendly gaming store and find someone who likes what you like. Whereas your knitting stores, there may be someone knitting, but, I walk in with my multicolored hair and some of the older people are a little bit, what are you doing? It's the community, and people have asked me that before. Why don't you give away the model painting if it's causing you this heartache? Especially when I was making the Titan and it was all going horribly wrong, and I was just falling further and further behind everything. Just switch to the knitting and do that. And certainly, it would be a lot easier if I could just do one or the other as far as having space in my house. Because both of those things are not hobbies that take up a small amount of room. And that's important as well. If you're having a hobby as a business, have a separate area where you do the hobby for a business would be a really big tip I could give anybody. Even to the point of doing your own hobby somewhere else. So you really do separate where you go to work from where you go to do things to relax, because work is stressful inherently. It doesn't have to be, but you've got time limits. Sometimes the brush just don't want to do what the brush does. If it's my thing, I'll go, well, whatever, that's good enough. But if it's for a customer, it's not okay. And sometimes you have to paint something in a way that you hate because that's what they want. You're either matching into a scheme they already have, or they don't know enough about painting to know that having a white and dark blue half and half spaceship is a really terrible idea. Seriously, half white, half blue. Oh, with yellow highlights. No. No, okay. And that's the thing. Well, and particularly as I do have, and I'm a terrible person. I've put my hobby set up in the bedroom because it was the only place in this tiny house we had sort of free and available. So it forces me to keep good hours because I have to shut everything down and go to bed in the same room. I can't leave everything a mess. I have to think about spray painting. I can't spray paint too late at night, otherwise the fumes in the bedroom are not a good thing.
No.
Which is quite bad. And smelly glue. Smelly glue happens downstairs would be the only different thing. And that's important. Having staging areas where you have things ready to go, having your cues sorted out, and the organisation of that, how you track what you're up to, what you're doing next, who wants what, who paid for what. So in 6 months, when your favourite customer comes back and goes, oh, I'll pay what you paid last time, you don't have to go, oh, what? You know how much they paid last time, you can charge them the same amount. So it's interesting, but also tracking it for your bookkeeper or tax person, or if you're crazy enough to do it yourself. Even if it's a simple spreadsheet, track what you're doing. Definitely. And then, if you're going to go social media hard. Frequent posting. Frequent little silly posting will build your channel and your image up faster than posting once a week with a lengthy, really good quality content. And that is counterintuitive, but it's the truth. One of my tweets that has had the furthest reach is a tweet I did of my airbrush in my sonic cleaner, making the worst noise you can imagine. It's just 5 seconds of my airbrush is on cleaner. It's not what I've been doing. It was just sonic power. And that's the thing. It's fickle. But yeah, and that's the reason why I don't give up my painting. I love being in the community so much. And it's to the point now where I get asked to give lessons to places. That's brilliant for me because of my lack of time. I can commit half a day to giving a bunch of lessons to people. That's easy. I'll walk anyone through anything on Skype. I love doing it. I love painting. I want everyone to get in and paint. I love the fact that there are more women painting, like visibly. I'm not the only girl in the game store anymore. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's something I definitely want to encourage. I think the hobby's stronger for it. Definitely. And so I'll get anyone in, give them a lesson, and show them what's going on.
Yeah, I think I mentioned a little earlier on the lady I chatted with a couple of episodes ago, Terry Litorco, and she actually, of course, I follow her on Twitter, and I did notice a couple of mentions that she made, sort of about the convention scene where she is, and she lives in Canada, and she made a tweet that someday she would like it that when she went to a meetup or an event, that the women's bathroom wasn't by default her personal bathroom.
Yeah.
It's
changing. It is definitely changing. And what it is people our age having daughters, bringing them into the hobby and telling them not to take any crap from anyone.
Yeah.
And that's what's doing it. So I reckon give them another 10, 15 years to get jobs and get income of their own. And if we don't lose them to other hobbies, and that's the thing, how many 8, 9, 10-year-old girls you see running around gaming conventions and tournaments and things? There are lots of daughters around, and then they turn into teenage girls and they go and do other things. And we need to have a community and we need to have an environment where they feel comfortable enough to be who they are and stay. Right? They don't have to become tomboys to feel like that they can stay in the community. And that's something that is changing very rapidly. And that was what I ended up doing. I stripped my online presence back to being very gender neutral, and I acted like one of the lads. Yeah. And it wasn't again until I hit my 30s I'd become a lot more comfortable with who I was. I can be a bit more girly. I'm nail polished now. And that's it. But a lot of stereotypically women pursuits can actually help you skill up in your painting as well. Nail art is brilliant. Fingernail art. So you get your tiny little brushes and your acrylic model paint and you do freehand designs on someone's fingernails and cover them over. They're going to wear that for 2 weeks and then they disappear. It's not like you have to get it absolutely perfect first time because it's going to be on that model for life. And a lot of the tools and accessories that are in nail art are brilliant for doing tiny, tiny freehand designs on banners and things. Banners the size of a fingernail, mate.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It seems incredible the amount of crossover that there is, I guess not only just with the specific techniques of makeup and painting. I remember hearing at one point, I was listening to a podcast where two ladies, one of them was again Terry, I'll mention it by name, the Board Dames podcast. They've only got 4 episodes out so far, and they keep talking about trying to get more regular content out. It doesn't seem to have quite happened yet, but I think when Terry was talking about how she discovered this cheap-ass brush, some sort of cosmetics brush that was actually perfect for doing dry brushing, especially on larger models like, the bigger spaceships and things, or if, you just wanted to give a general dry brush, I guess, to get something tabletop ready. But this, cheap brush was better for dry brushing than a lot of the dedicated modelling brushes that you get for that purpose. And cheaper. On eBay, nail art supplies. So you get the really, really thin nail art strip tape, striper tape, the masking tape. It's all really, really, really super cheap. And it's just, once the hobby community discover this, it's going to just cross over and they'll put a premium on it. Yeah.
But I buy a lot of but also going back to the makeup, as a miniature painter, you want to get a nice face because that's what people tend to pick up your model and they'll look at the face first. We're humans. It's a human thing. One of the things I found the most helpful for me is watching YouTube tutorials on cross-gender contouring.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you paint a female face different to a male face? So and the problem, again, with a lot of sculpts on miniature models is that they're tiny, but most sculptors are men.
Yeah.
Most sculptors are used to looking at a male face in the mirror. They don't quite understand the differences between male and female faces. So if you can look at a tutorial on how to contour a male face to make it look more feminine, and you apply those shadings and highlight patternings to your miniature model and blend it all out, it will look $1 million. And everyone will go, oh my goodness, that's the best thing I've ever seen. And it's taking you 5 minutes to do. It's a brilliant, 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 cheaty trick, I guess. But the other thing, watching nail art tutorials on YouTube, a lot of the nail artists go into the fundamentals on how to paint tiny lines, which is not something I've ever seen. Actually, that's not true. There is one painter here in the UK called Tommy Soule, Soule, and he teaches a fundamental painting course, which includes how you hold your paintbrush. All those things that you never learnt in art in school on how to get really good brush control and get the paint to do exactly what you need the paint to do. Fantastic. And then once you've got that on lock, it becomes intuitive and you'll just go bang, 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 bang. And I do this. I have a 2-minute stand-up lesson that I can do in a friendly gaming store where people go, I can't get on with edge highlighting. And I'm like, I can show you exactly what you're doing wrong and I can show you in 2 minutes how to be a better edge highlighter. And that's it, just how to draw these fine lines. And that's one thing, actually getting into more the teaching is I'm doing a lot of courses over here. Being in the UK, there are lots and lots of studio painters, both in the UK and in Europe, that run classes on how to be a better miniature painting. And there's a lot of differing styles over here. And so I can go to a studio and go, show me how to paint your studio style. Courses are brilliant. And I go on anyone that comes across that I can make, I go and do. Which people go, but why? It's a beginner's course. You're not a beginner painter. Why are you going to the course? But if I can sit in on a lesson that someone else gives on how to paint a beginner technique, And they teach that in a different way than I do. It's something else I have in order to try and get the message across. If I've got someone who's just not getting what I'm saying, I can try and say it how Tommy Soul says it, or I can try and say it how the Siege Studio guys say it. I can try and teach it how the heavy metal team up in Nottingham taught it. All of these courses, and just if you learn one little trick that makes your painting better, it's well worth it. That's another thing. You got all these online tutorials, really brilliant YouTubers kicking out tutorials. The Wargamers Consortium are fantastic. By Painted out of, I think he's Polish, he's Eastern European. Just you can quite easily teach yourself at home how to be a better painter without having to talk to another human being, which is great. A lot of painters are introverts. It makes organising painting meetup days really interesting because you're like, how is anyone going to actually turn up today? It always ends up fun in the end, but it's just getting there is a problem. But it's a good community, and it's something I can do, again, because everybody's engaged 24/7 around the world. I can have 10 minutes off in my lunch break at work and just check in on what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not painting myself, I can get dead jealous at what everyone else is painting. Dude.
Isn't it always the way? Now, we've talked about sort of like these two aspects of your kind of freelance life, and I don't think we've sort of as yet identified kind of where you are on that general pay-to-play spectrum. So you do still have the day job, and from the sounds of it, you're semi-on call on that basis. As you mentioned, if a crisis occurs, you could find yourself being shipped halfway across the world at very short notice. But you do still have these two other freelance aspects to your life. How do you find juggling the time? Is the first question I want to ask about that at the moment.
Badly. I'm terrible at it. I am awful at it. Now, my job, the day jobs I have, I do IT project management, and these are global contracts. So say you are a enormous multinational with 300 offices all around the globe. You've got 500,000 people working for you, and all of a sudden Microsoft says everyone needs to upgrade off Windows XP because we no longer support it.
Yeah.
I'm that team. I'm the person who comes in and helps coordinate that. Now, that may only be an 18-month job, but for those 18 months, I live, breathe, and eat both time zones. I work UK and US hours, or I work UK and Australia Pacific hours, and I put 60, 70, 80-hour weeks into my job. And at that point, I don't paint. It goes down to zero. I'm still engaging in the community through Twitter. I may be able to have half a day off and go and do a painting meetup or a course. And that's why I love doing the courses, because they are 2 days or 1 day that I can go and just paint my stuff and get my painting fix. I've been lucky with this job in that there's a games workshop in my building. So I've been able to get stress relief through going down and going, give me a paintbrush, give me something to paint. And they're all like, oh, okay. I was dry brushing a gaming board there last week going, I have to get back to work, but I have to keep on painting this board. And they're great. They've been really good, and I can sort of come down and just sit there for 20 minutes and just zone out on my painting and get my calm back.
So they've probably got the Sim stress relief kit set aside somewhere in the back office for if and when you rock down with that look on your face.
It's whatever. I paint whatever they're going on. Yeah, it works out. And then I do the thing where I have to go back to work. Someone's called me and I've painted something, and I'm like, there you go, you can finish it off. And they're like, no. But that's how that works. And essentially while I'm working, I've got very, very little time for painting. Even though it's a pity because it is a massive stress relief for me. Knitting, not so bad. I dropped the machine knitting section. I still do a lot of hand knitting because I commute. So on the trains and stuff, I always have my knitting in my bag or my crochet in my bag. So that's not too bad. But when I'm off, it may take me a couple of months to get a big job because these big contracts and projects don't kick off every week.
No.
So I've then got a couple of months. So my contract's 12, 18 months is usual. And then I'll have a couple of months off. And in those couple of months is where I do all of my knitting and painting. So for me, it's a really all or nothing thing. So as I'm coming towards the end of my contract, I'll start asking around if anybody has anything for me to paint. I'll contact my knitwear designer and say, what colours and stuff do you want? I've got, some time now, and she just sends me a list, and then I just kick on with it. And then when I get a job again, as I can, because it takes a little while for these things to ramp up, I just finish things off in between my work, hand them off, and then I stop until I've next not got a contract.
Yeah.
And that's basically, no matter how much I say, I know I'm going to be able to do both, I can't.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
In terms of getting paid to play, do you sort of harbour any ambitions where you might be looking at perhaps one day being able to set the day job aside and concentrate purely on earning an income from knitting and, that combination that you've got of knitting and model painting? Is that something you've considered?
No. I love my job. Don't get me wrong. My job is stressful and it's hard and it's full on crazy, but I love what I do. I love all of what I do. I love my hobby and I love my job, but I don't think I could do one without the other as well. If that makes sense. Both of the hobbies I have are so isolated. Yeah. There's not a lot of contact with people. Sitting at home and painting models or sitting at home and doing my knitting, there are social events where I can go out and do these things. Whereas work makes me go and be human people. And if I don't get that human contact, I become very strange. Yeah. I find interacting with humanity quite difficult. So I need that human daily kind of contact. Yeah. And that's what happens. When I don't have that, I end up jumping on my bicycle and going to Anvil Industries and turning up and going, hi, can I paint some stuff? Or I go down to Darksphere, which is a local gaming store here, and I just rock up and help them out and sit at the back and paint my stuff there. So I need that human, definitely need that human interaction. Or go to the library and knit. That's great. Yeah. You make friends so quick. And pubs, knitting in the back of a pub, you will make friends so quickly. Yeah.
So it really kind of sounds like you've pretty much got your life, it sounds like you've got it where you want it, really.
Yeah, as far as workings, the next step for me certainly is, at the moment I'm renting a tiny house in Zone 3, which means nothing if you're not in London. It's about half an hour travel into the middle of London. So the next step for us is to save up deposit and get a house a bit further out. And I'd love somewhere where I could have a shed, either in a backyard in a house, or rent out a makerspace and have a proper studio where I can go and make mess and noise and sparks and do a bit more metalwork and build some bigger projects and stuff, and not just have it all have to sit on my tiny desk in the corner of my bedroom. That would be and then I could sort of do lessons and maybe collaborate a bit more with other people. That would be where I wanted to be next, but that's a little way off with housing prices being what they are in London at the moment.
Of course, sadly, yeah. Well, I think you have pretty much answered in one form or another most of the questions that I tend to ask at the end of a chat. I mean, I ask people, what's next? What are they looking forward to on the horizon? And it sounds like the what's next, aside from Salute, which sadly I think will have been and gone by the time this podcast actually airs.
It's every year in April, so there's always next Salute. And that's the thing, that once Salute's gone, you just start counting down to next Salute.
It's like Christmas, huh? Except better.
Yeah, because there's models. And no one gives you socks. Everything is models.
And as you've just mentioned, the next main ambition is to get a house so that you can have more space for your hobbies. Is there sort of... And then, of course, there's the Warlord Titan.
It's going to happen. Yeah. No, after the house. No, we will house deposit, then Titan, definitely. Okay.
So beyond those things, is there anything else sort of maybe just over the horizon that you're hoping to get to at some point? Any aspirations, any goals?
Definitely. There's a machine knitting a course called Dream Week up in Metropolitan in September every year that I like to go to, but I have to wait for my mum to come over because she'll murder me if I go without her. And I suspect she's going to New Zealand this year, and then she might be going to Portland. There's a PSAP yearly meetup convention thing. PSAP's a kind of knitting machine. It's a bit strange.
Okay.
There's like a Ford and Holden thing in the knitting world between brother and singer.
Right.
And then PSAP is this really weird, strange Japanese, I think Japanese? No, they might not be. Singer and brother are definitely Japanese. Anyway, it works completely differently, and it's this archaic, weird, strange witchcraft machine that people who can use it are sort of always held in slight awe by the rest of us. And she's really good at using one, and so she wants to go to one of those in America next year. Mm. So she's not going to come. We were going to both go 2017 to Metropolitan Dream Week, but she's not coming. So I might go without her just to punish her, but maybe not. But yeah, other than that, courses. There's a couple of courses coming up at Dark Sphere that I'm going to go down to. And then, Space Marine 30th anniversary in a couple of weeks.
Bloody hell. I saw those notices out at the Games Workshop in Cairns. I just walked past, they had the poster up and the thing, and I just went, holy
I'm
shit,
so old.
We're old.
I am so old. Yeah. I know, right?
Yes.
But I love a Space Marine. I never get to paint Space Marines anymore because people gives me tricky stuff to do. But I did. Last year we did a charity auction for Macmillan. So Macmillan over here is a organisation that supports people and people's families who have been diagnosed with cancer. Mm. And so we put together a salamander army because the Macmillan's colours are black, white and green. Uh-huh. And we got painters through Twitter, a group called Warmongers. If you search the hashtag Warmongers, plural, you'll find us. And there's a effort over here called Wargamers All Against Cancer, WAAC, again, all caps hashtag, which Wargamers do fundraising through Wargaming for charity cancer Macmillan's nurses. Mm. And I was involved in the salamander auction last year. We had raffle. We had a bunch of gamers from all over the world donate painting time. We had a bunch of non and not quite so good painters donate models and their painting skills. And everybody sort of sent, if they didn't want to paint but they had models, they would send them to sort of painters, and went around a lot of people saying, donate me your bits, and boxes and kits and things like that. And we got a whole army. It was like over 3,000 points of salamanders. And then Dark Sphere came to the party. They gave us space and materials to base everything the same. And then they donated KR multi-cases. KR multi-cases gave us a massive discount on, and then that cost was covered by Dark Sphere to put them into figure model cases. And then we raffled the whole thing off. We earned, was over 1,000. Not sure what the final figure was, over £1,000.
Wow.
It was a massive, massive thing. It was so much fun. But I painted a squad of TAC Marines for that. With my new airbrush. I was so proud because it's been ages, but I used one of my painted's techniques with the pre-shading from below and above using the Zenithal, base coating. So it was a lot of fun. I'm like, I have to do that again. But that's the thing. When I'm working those little tiny projects, I can sort of kick along. Buying a terrain set and just sort of painting it in an afternoon with a bunch of friends is really fun. And that's sort of, for me, it's not something I earn any money off, but it's something that keeps me in the hobby, keeps my eye in and gets me, at least participating and people don't wonder if I'm dead. Which happens.
And again, normally I ask people for three things, three hints or tips that perhaps you'd wish you'd known when you were starting out that might help somebody else. And I think, let's see. You pretty much gave me 3 or 4, I think, in short order earlier on. When you're organising a commission job, make sure you sort out all the details up front. It was
absolutely
tip 1. Tip 2, well, I think tip 2 and tip 3
Communicate.
kind of combine. Communicate, including create a prototype of, your, do a single miniature so that you can make sure you've got the paint scheme right, and the person at the other end says, that yes, this is what I was asking for, or no, I need it to be a little bit more like this.
Even if you've painted a model for this person 6 or 7 times before, always never listen to them when they go, it's okay, it's not okay. It'll never be okay.
No.
Always do that. Even if they say, no, it's fine. No, it's not fine. Always, always, always. Yep.
And finally, make sure that you do set out a separate space for your hobby and I suppose your business. So at least you're not, if you're sitting down in this space, you've not got perhaps maybe the slightly negative vibes that you might get from working on your business while you're trying to do your hobby kind of thing. And just keep them as separate as possible.
I suppose that's for me, because I use my hobby, I paint to relax.
Yeah.
But painting, if I've got stress in my work and I've got stress because I'm late because my work's making me late with a commission, that becomes a stressful place. And I feel guilty if I'm not working on my commission, if I'm painting my own stuff.
Yeah. Mm.
As well. Mm. So if I'm doing that at my local friendly gaming store, not quite so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, that pretty much takes us to the end of our chat, Sim. So after hearing this episode, if people are keen to find out more about you and perhaps join your queue for getting a Sim Lauren commissioned miniature.
No. Queue is closed. I will give lessons though, and I will help you paint lessons over Skype, or if you have a question, if I can't answer it, one of the Warmongers can. They're brilliant community. So grab me on.
Yeah, sorry. You've mentioned that Twitter is basically your social media home for your hobby life online. So yes, what's your Twitter handle?
I'm Painty Sim, PAINTYSIM.
Right. And is there anywhere else that people can connect with you online?
I have got a website, but it's currently under construction. But it will basically be replicating what I create on Twitter and be a bit of a home for that. And that's simlauren.com.
Okay. All right, well...
Hopefully. I'm moving to WordPress. It's been a bit... it's not as easy as what I was led to believe when I decided to go WordPress over SharePoint, but okay.
No, it's I'm fiddling with my own website at the moment, and it does require a little bit of that you've got to progress up a bit of a learning curve at times, especially when you're fiddling with themes, I think.
Yeah, no, I've gotten to, I'm taking my own advice, and that is actually another thing when you're doing things for yourself is learn where your limits are and get help.
Yeah.
And so with my bookkeeping and my tax, I get help. It's not something I'm willing to take a risk on. And the same with my website. It got to the point where I'm just like, nope. So I've grabbed somebody. Actually, I met in a gaming store. We got talking about what he was doing and studying, and I went, can you help me do my website? And that he's also at uni, so he's only able to work at it when he's back from uni break, which is making things interesting. And I'm slack. I haven't done a whole bunch of stuff I should for him, which I should get to this weekend. It's a long weekend.
All right. Well, I'd say that pretty much brings us to the end of our chat, Sim. So thank you once again for coming on Pay to Play. It has been an especial pleasure to have you on the show, not just as to talk with someone who, from the sounds of it, has actually pretty much found that work-play-life balance and is kind of got their life pretty much, where most of us wish it were right at the moment. But it's also been great chatting with a mate with whom, we don't keep in touch nearly enough with.
Well, now I've got your Skype again. That might be a bit easier.
Fingers crossed. And I think we mentioned trying to play a via Skype version game of XCOM the board game sometime, which I'd absolutely love to do.
I reckon that'd work really well. Actually, and I'd love to get you into Blood Rage too.
Aha, okay. I've been hearing a lot of talk about Blood Rage again. Terry and Bebo of the Board Dames seem to espouse its virtues left, right and centre, so we'll see how we go. I still do have my paints and my brushes after giving up both my War Machine and my Infinity miniatures. Well, I sold them basically, and they subsidised the purchase of XCOM, which does have some miniatures, which I do occasionally look at and think, they could use a bit of painting up.
That UFO needs a bit of an undercoat. Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I'm the same.
I've got to admit, I look at the piles of UFO miniatures and I think, yeah, maybe not. I mean, they're red, they're evil, that looks fine. But I look at the interceptors and the soldiers, and it's like, yeah, they could. I could. I've kind of got the right colours, especially for the soldiers. I've got some nice off whites I can use for them. So, I'm looking